Hi, this is Alan White, and I want to share with you some thoughts on connecting your entire congregation and give you 3 secrets to effectively launching groups in your church. Back when I was first starting out in ministry, our senior pastor had to resign, and it was devastating to our congregation. In fact, we lost everybody that was in favor of the pastor, we lost everybody who was against the pastor, and all of the staff left except for me. And so there I was with 85 people praying about what God would do next. It was a difficult year, to say the least. The very last Sunday of that year, we brought on our new senior pastor, and it brought us hope. Our church started growing, not dramatically, but consistently. And as the church began to grow, we began to hear things like once we got to 250 people on Sunday morning, people would say, I don't know everybody anymore. And then once we got to about 400 people and went to 2 services, they would say things more like, I can't even find the people that I do know. And we knew at that point we needed to change something because everybody didn't need to know everybody, but everybody needed to know somebody. And so I went to conferences, learning about small groups. I read books. You can see my books. I interviewed other pastors. And, the more I learned, honestly, the more confused I became. And so finally we decided just to start. And so let me share some of these things that we learned from starting. The first thing we learned, the first secret is that small groups connect people like never before. And so we knew that as fast as our church was growing, we had a couple Sunday school classes, we had a midweek Bible study, but what we recognized was that both of these were declining. They were kind of old school ways of discipleship. They were discipling the people that were there, but they weren't meeting the larger demand of our congregation. And so we knew we had to get groups off the ground. And so we knew small groups were going to do this for us. So the second secret we learned was this, that quality leaders are the guarantee to a quality experience. And I wanted to make sure we had good quality. So I actually personally recruited every small group leader in the church. Now, I went to all of the usual suspects first. The people that, they'll do anything you ask them to do. So I talked to the board members, I talked to the founding members, I talked to other solid citizens, and we launched 10 groups. And as soon as we launched 10 groups, we filled up 10 groups. And then we had a year before we went through the cycle of launching more groups. It's just kind of the way the pace went. And so we would try to funnel people into the midweek Bible study or funnel people into Sunday school, which weren't working great, but in order to give them some place to land. And then, we had another group. We did these turbo groups like Carl George talks about in his book, Prepare Your Church for the Future. Put them in these 2 turbo groups, launched a half a dozen more groups, and as soon as we launched those groups, we filled up those groups. And I kept doing these groups and recruiting leaders and handpicking and on and on and on. And the reality was that as much as we were doing that, it was hard to keep up because the congregation was continuing to increase. The third secret, though, was not to skimp on coaching and training. Coaching and training are key. We didn't have a lot of leaders, so it was kind of easy to keep tabs on them. But I did have a couple of coaches. We met for a monthly huddle meeting, getting to know the leaders, giving some training. The coaches would go out and visit the groups and fill out a report. And all of those things worked very, very well. But we also discovered in the sequence of all of this some places where we failed. Mainly we had created a bottleneck because I had to recruit all the leaders, and let me tell you that part of the story. So the first failure we had was our group simply could not keep pace with the growth of the church. I could not get enough leaders fast enough. I couldn't get enough groups fast enough. Now we had thought, we'll adapt the apprentice model. And so every leader would identify an apprentice in their group. They would train that apprentice, kind of on-the-job training, and then at some point the group, either the leader would leave the group to start a group, the apprentice would lead the group to start a group, or we would divide the group up and they would start 2 groups. And we ran into some problems. As much as I encouraged and emphasized and overemphasized the necessity of apprentices, we ran into our second failure, and that was that our leaders could not identify an apprentice. They couldn't. And so I would talk about this in the meetings, and I would contact them. I would have personal conversations with them and say, listen, you need to develop an apprentice, because, I mean, at this point, it seemed like the future of our small group ministry, the future of connecting people, the future of keeping people from falling through the cracks, all of that depended on whether or not these apprentices were developed. And I thought, well, if everybody has an apprentice, we'll double these groups every year. And so we have twice as many groups. We'll add some more to that. And we'll double our groups every year until we get caught up. And it reached such a point of frustration. My leaders would come up to me on Sunday morning, and they would actually say to me, they'd look me in the eye and say, I'm working on my apprentice. And I thought, whatever happened to hello? And but it got ugly. The other thing we discovered, and this was failure number 3, was nobody wanted to leave their group. We invited to come in, get to know each other, get comfortable, relax, and, be like family. And then we were asking their family to get a divorce by dividing up into groups, and nobody wanted to leave the group that they were in. And that just went nowhere fast. And so the church is continuing to grow. We're still not getting there as far as the groups that we need in order for people to get involved. And I pounded that nail for 7 years. Now, maybe that's stupid, but I pounded that nail for 7 years because I thought this is the thing that's going to work. And if I persist, and some years our turbo groups would net half a dozen new leaders. Some years I'd get 2 new leaders. Some years I would get 0 new leaders. And we were just stuck. Now, we were stuck at about 30% of our adults connected into groups. And some people told me, well, that's good because, 30% is, if you have 30% of your people in groups, you're in the top 1% of all churches in the country. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good, except, I was frustrated. And even though, we were at that place, we were just not at the place that we needed to be. And it seemed like the way we were doing things, it was going to take at least another 100 years in order to get to where we wanted to go. So I want to give you guys a little bit of training this week for free. I'm doing this mini course, and it's going to be over the next 3 days. Pardon me, I have a little cold. But over the next 3 days, and it's going to be on video, so you can watch it anytime you want to. And in these 3 parts, we're going to talk about some of the things that I abandoned out of what I just described, some of the new things that we tried purely out of frustration, if anything else. But where we eventually got to a place where we had 125% of our average adult attendance connected into groups. And that isn't funny math. We had more people in groups than we had attending the weekend service, and some of those people didn't even go to our church. So it took a little bit to get there, and I'm going to spend the next few days kind of unpacking that for you to let you know how we got there. So sign up. There's a button there. Click the button to sign up for this mini course. And we're going to talk the next time on breaking the 30% barrier. You're the top half of 1%, or whatever they say, of churches in the country. But 30% is a very easy place to get stuck, and it's a place that I got stuck. Now, you may be well beyond that, but I think that in this mini course, you may learn some things if you're stuck at 50%, or if you're stuck at 2/3, or what have you. So anyway, go ahead and sign up, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.